Welcome, everyone, back to Beyond Motherhood for another week. And I am very excited. I've got my first guest for 2025 on the podcast this week. I've got the beautiful Charlotte Ravelid from Mama Time Yoga. And welcome, Charlotte. Glad to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
Amazing. And I'm excited to dive into what we're going to chat about today, which is all around sort of finding calm and connection in motherhood, which we can all relate
Yes.
to amidst the craziness and the roller coaster ride that is motherhood. But first, I'd love you to just share a bit more about yourself, Charlotte, and yeah, even just share a bit about Mama Time Yoga and the story behind what brought you to where you are now.
Sure, I'd love to. Yeah, so yeah, Mama Time Yoga is basically it has, a few forms now, but it's all about supporting you through motherhood with different tools to do that through. So my favorite tools are yoga and mindfulness, but it's also community. As you know, community is so important to mothers and mothers' well-being, being within community and each other. And then there's, different ways that we offer that. And it really came about for me when I had my first son back in 2019. So I was teaching yoga prior to that. I'm now a pre and postnatal yoga teacher. But before I was just teaching more general yoga, probably more like high intensity vinyasa type yoga was really what I was into and pretty scared to teach prenatal. When you're just general sort of yoga teacher training, you get about, maybe one lesson, a couple hours about, what to do with pre and postnatal students, which is wild if you think about how many, especially postnatal students, we probably all teach as yoga teachers. But anyway, I was just like, it wasn't my jam. I wasn't in that stage of life yet. I would get a little bit nervous when I had pregnant students come to my class. And then fast forward to my own pregnancy, I absolutely loved being pregnant, which was a shock to me as well. Like I always knew I wanted kids, but the whole pregnancy birth thing freaked me out a little bit. But I just loved it. I loved the softening, I think is kind of the best word that I can use. It wasn't like it was just a very different energy. And like, especially with my yoga practice, like I said, I was really doing a lot of like vinyasa and high intensity. And my like, judgment of my yoga practice is like, what advanced poses can I do? And I was really missing a whole side of yoga because yoga is so much more layered than just the asana, the physical posture side. I was, yeah, sort of bypassing all of that. And pregnancy just makes you really surrender to that
Mm.
softening, that more feminine side of things. And I was just very much surprised about how much I enjoyed that and coming into that softness and that more just gentle movement and being. I was still quite active, but just going about it in a very different way. And then just how pregnancy and mindfulness can really support you, yeah, through those ups and downs, or sorry, yoga and mindfulness can really support you through your pregnancy, your birth, and then after. And so I did all the things through my pregnancy. I did pregnancy yoga. I did, Pilates. I went to pregnancy circles. I did so much. And then when I had my son in November of 2019, I had a pretty typical experience. And I felt like I was pretty prepared because I did all the things. I did the hypnobirthing class. I
Mm.
had I still have a stepdaughter, and I'd been a stepmom for 5 years before becoming a mom, and she was 5 when we had our son. So I'd been in that space. Oh, sorry, she was 9. Sorry. I'd been a stepmom for 5 years and she was 9. So I'd seen her through those younger years as well. Um, and so I felt like I had a pretty good grip on like what to expect, although knowing I didn't know what it was like to have a newborn. And wow, is all I can say. That really is, as every mom knows, it is such an initiation to
Mm.
motherhood. And I think, like so many women, I put so much emphasis on the pregnancy and the birth. And then you're put into this postpartum phase, which never ends, but especially that initial
Mm.
postpartum period where you're like, oh, this is like, and like I said, I had a very typical experience. He ended up being a C-section, which wasn't my plan at all, but was born very healthy. I was healthy. I was very happy with how everything went. So, not a birth that I was how I planned, but still went smoothly, I think. And he was great when he was born. We had a little bit of trial and error learning to breastfeed, and that was difficult. But I was loving being a mom. I absolutely loved being in that newborn bubble with him. But I was still like, wow, this is like next level just stress that I don't think enough women talk about because we just get through it. And so, this is a long story to tell you that basically in that period, I realized how much like all of those things that I was doing pregnancy wise, like those classes, that community I had, those were just for pregnancy. And they sort of ended there.
Mm.
And there's all these beautiful offerings in that postnatal period, but kind of after that 6 to 12 week point, and you're managing so much as a new mom anyway. Like for me, it was like really learning how to establish breastfeeding. Will we ever be able to leave the house again, without my boobs being out all the time? Like, are we ever going to sleep again? All, like I said, my experience was quite normal, or what I considered to be normal. And I just thought like it was so stressful for me. And I felt like I was very detached from all these groups and communities and support that I had. Like I had my friends and family, of course, but it wasn't that this kind of like container that I was in prior. It was like almost like, okay, well, now you have your baby, you have some sort of isolated time at home, and then you have to find new containers to be in. And so I just remember sitting up with my son one night and just thinking, like, well, what if there was something that just carried you through?
Mm.
What if, like, and I think of terms in yoga, like that's what I love. So I was like, what if I could create a yoga community that really sees women through their whole motherhood journey so they never feel like, oh, now I need those practices more than ever. My time is more limited than ever, but I have to go back out and seek out different groups and, find different things. I just wanted a really seamless,
Mm.
yeah, experience for women.
Yeah. And I think as well, when you're in that newborn phase, then having to sort of look up all these things postpartum and do your research like that in itself can be overwhelming. So if you've got
Yes.
something that you've already established prior to like prenatal, like yeah, like you said, it's just like this seamless continuation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do love now, like I am definitely finding, or maybe it's just because I'm more aware of it myself, but there is a lot more emphasis on postpartum care now than
Yes.
there would have been like 5, 10 years ago. When my eldest is 11 this year, and even back then, like the only thing that is you went to the child health nurse or whatever to do your checkups, or they'd be like, go and join a mums and bubs group, and which was lovely and great,
Yeah.
but yeah, I wouldn't say that was necessarily just, something that mums that really, yeah, that went probably a little bit deeper and stuff like that. So I do notice now, and I don't know if you find that as well, that there's definitely more of an emphasis on postpartum care, would you say?
I think so. I think the conversation is going in the right direction. And I think sometimes we only have hindsight after we've been through that
Yeah.
experience. Like I said, I definitely put way too much emphasis on the pregnancy and the birth because that's kind of like what I could see right in front of me. But
Mm,
if you look in terms of like what stages you're in for longer, that postpartum period never ends. So I think once we have the baby, we kind of realize, oh my gosh, I put all this emphasis on something that was, especially birth wise. Yeah, birth can be long and it's important. Don't get me wrong. I would definitely do the things I did around birth, but I would also spend a lot more time looking at things like, not just postpartum routines. And I mean, there's so much out there. Some of it's great, some of it's
mm,
not, as we all know. But I think like, okay, well, what is my level of being able to deal with an increased amount of stress? When I'm sleep deprived, when I'm having to learn new skills, when my hormones are all over the place, what are my
mm.
actual coping mechanisms that I'm going to lean on that can take me 5 minutes? Like
Yeah.
I think having things like that in place, that's where I would love to see the conversation go. I think
Yeah.
there's a lot around postpartum, but just being able to just acknowledge that one, I don't care how normal your experience is, you are going to have increased stress levels. You're learning new skills, you're like all those other factors that I just mentioned. And yeah, how are you going to cope with that when you don't really have much time to yourself? I think that's a really important conversation that I would like to see had a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And as a yoga and mindfulness teacher, how would you, I guess, yeah, support mothers in rediscovering themselves and their identity and finding calm amidst the sometimes chaos of motherhood?
Yeah. I think you really have to accept the season that you're in and
Mm,
work with it, not against it. Because if we keep trying what worked for us before having kids, we're going to be beating our head against a wall and we're going to
yeah,
feel worse than we probably did. So I think that's step one, accept where you're at. It's okay. It's a season. It won't last forever. Acknowledge that it's okay to have time for you. I think we can get so wrapped up in all the things we do need to do for other people. So really just owning that, I need to be a priority as well is
mm,
super important. And then just looking at like what actually works for you, not trying to do more than you have time for. So really starting small. Like I said, 5 minutes can make a huge difference. So maybe you're in that first 6 week period of having a baby and your baby's gone to sleep and you're like, I need to do this, this, this. I also need to have a nap. Amazing. Put on a 5 minute guided meditation. Do 5 minutes of breathing. Just regulate your own nervous system
mm.
and then feel into your body and see what you actually want to do. Like, get rid of the shoulds. The laundry will still be there. It's okay. It'll still be there. Everything else will still be there after, but you've got to look after yourself. I think that's so important.
Yeah, because that then trickles down into everything else, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And it's easy to do, but it's just as easy not to do. Like I remember doing this with my kids and I still catch myself do it. Like if my youngest goes down for a nap and I'm like, okay, I should take some time for myself, but I just need to do this, this first. And then by the time I get to myself, he's awake. So just flip that. Put yourself first. Even if it's just 5 minutes. I think it's yeah. And then you build that habit and you realize how impactful it is to the rest of your day, how you react to whatever comes up because we're not going to stop like you said the chaos. We're not going to be able to stop the chaos, but if we feel regulated in ourselves, we are going to feel better about how we're handling whatever comes up that day.
Yeah, that's right. And like you said, I mean, the to-do list, it's always, there's always going to be something on it, right? You can
Mm,
always do another load
always.
of laundry, or I feel like I spend a lot of my time in the kitchen and sometimes I'm like, no, just stop. Like, I'm just going to do it all at the end of the day. Like, no one's coming to look at my kitchen. Like, it doesn't matter really in the grand scheme of things. We kind of get caught in this cycle of like, it has to be done now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's about, like you were saying before, like just letting go of control and surrendering as well can be a
Hmm.
great practice when it comes to, as mothers, letting go of some of that stuff to then be able to prioritize ourselves sometimes. It's a practice for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And like I said, sometimes I still catch myself doing that. It's like it's all a practice. Yeah.
100%. And do you have any favorite, like you mentioned, just doing like a 5 minute guided meditation, but do you have any other favorite yoga or mindfulness techniques or practices that, especially busy moms, which look, we all are, let's be honest.
Every mom is a busy mom,
Yeah.
100%.
That they can integrate into their day-to-day lives to help just manage the stress and to even just come back to center and reconnect with themselves.
I think for me, like I love the yoga and the mindfulness component because they work really well together in the sense of the yoga for me is that mindful movement. So you're moving with your body, you're connecting with your breath, you're sort of shifting the energy. So, like a morning practice, for example, I love, it doesn't always happen like this, but really helps me wake up. Like, that's a good one. If you want to feel more awake after a rough night, do a couple of stretches and things like that. But even if you want to, like, it's whatever works for you. I have an early riser, so I know how hard the mornings can be if your kid won't let you actually get that practice in.
Yeah.
So, again, finding your time, whether it's nap time, whether it's before bedtime and you do a little bit more of a restorative practice, finding whatever movement works for you, though. Low-hanging fruit, go for a walk. Like do something that moves your body because those endorphins are incredible. And then after that, if you can combine the two, great. If not, split them up. But again, we're starting with the time that we have. We're not working against the time that we don't have. So either do them together if you can, or split them up, and then move into a mindful practice from there if you can, because you're going to be in a better state to actually drop into whatever that practice is if you've moved your body a little bit. And
Mm,
then finding there's so many different ways to practice mindfulness. So that can be just sitting, having those deep breaths. Sometimes the car is a great place to do that. If you've got a baby that falls asleep in the car, a kid that falls asleep in the car, spend,
mhm.
I mean, even 2 minutes, 2, 3, 5 minutes in the car in the driveway before you walk in. Take those deep breaths and then move in. Like there's so many simple ways just to integrate that into your day. Affirmations are great as well. I love like just an affirmation YouTube track. I
Mm,
still put that on sometimes when I'm breastfeeding my son in the morning. Because he's too wiggly to get like a proper meditation in. But I'm like, okay, I could be on my phone scrolling and starting my day with terrible energy I probably don't need, or I could just put on like a really calming affirmation track and then I've just got something nice playing in the background, even though I'm not focused enough to do like a proper
mm.
meditation. And then another mindfulness technique, like I've said, guided meditations are great too. But another one I love is just gratitude.
Yeah,
Simple gratitude, three things you're grateful for. And then you're just training your mind to look for those
yeah.
positive things throughout the day. I think that can just shift your whole perspective. So those are probably, yeah, finding whatever movement works for you and then whatever mindfulness practice works and fits into your routine as well.
Yeah, I gotta say the car is a place that I often do these mindfulness practice or just like regulating my nervous system at the set of lights or just repeating mantras in my head or singing them to
Mm-hmm.
myself. I use a lot of mantras and affirmations, but I tend to sing them or just sing them in my head. Um, but yeah, my youngest, he doesn't, well, typically he doesn't nap anymore, but it used to always be he'd fall asleep on the way to school pickup. So I'd always get
Oh,
there like
cute.
5 or so minutes before, and I'd be like, perfect. This is the time I can just close my eyes, focus on my breathing. Doesn't happen as much anymore, him falling asleep in the car. So sometimes it's literally at a set of lights. Like I'll just take a few deep breaths, especially if the
Amazing.
kids, like often it's with the kids in the car. And if they're kids in the car, my two boys, they can often be quite loud and it can be a bit
Oh,
overstimulating. So
yes.
it's just like coming back to my breath, coming back to that presence. And yeah, I think the car's a perfect one. I love using the car as
Oh,
very
absolutely. And I think
easy.
it's just finding those micro pockets. I think a lot of the times we
Yeah.
can get into our own stories and think, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for that. And like, listening to someone who's telling you you need a 40-minute,
Yeah.
meditation practice. Yeah, that's probably not achievable. But finding those micro pockets and at least
Mm,
starting there can make such a big difference. Like my motto is really
yeah.
something is better than nothing. So even if I set out to do a longer practice in the morning or so, I love a morning practice. It just doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
But I might set out, I might think like, okay, kids are still asleep. I'm up. I'm going to get like a 20-minute practice in. Okay, even if I get 10 minutes in and then I get interrupted, I still got 10 minutes. So I'm going to focus on that. I'm not
Yeah.
going to focus on that it was interrupted. I still got 10 minutes. That's great.
Yeah, yeah, I'm all for the micro moments and finding
Yeah.
those windows of opportunity, even if it's like 30 seconds or a minute. Like,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
if we're doing that multiple times throughout the day, it all stacks, right? And accumulates and supports us. Even the small moments count for sure.
Oh, definitely. And I think the more you take those moments as a practice, not necessarily like in moments where you desperately need them, but as a practice, when you have those really overstimulating moments where you're like, I am not coping, it is so much easier to lean on them because your body's
Mm.
already familiar with them. You know to lean on them and you're like, okay, I'm about to absolutely lose it, but I'm going to take a deep breath and then I'm going to react. And everyone has a very different experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've built such a beautiful community with Mama Time Yoga, and you've got obviously got some classes and programs that you teach, and there's such impact in creating a space like that for mothers. So I'd love you to just chat about the power of connecting with other mothers through shared experiences and shared practices, and how this can really, I guess, foster healing and growth for mothers.
Like I said, I think community for mothers is so important. It's so easy when we're at home, you're rocking that baby to sleep in the middle of the night and just like there's a lot of motherhood that's very isolating and where we can feel like we're the only ones dealing with something, but having a group of mom friends who are really in the trenches with you and just get it, it might not change anything you're experiencing it, but you're at least, it's not just you.
Yeah.
You have a group of women you can lean on and maybe find solutions. Maybe like, hey, my kid is going through this. Did your kid go through it? Maybe you'll find solutions, and that's amazing. But even just having an understanding group that gets it, that's been there, it just makes you feel like you're not alone. And I think we need that as moms.
Yeah, 100%. Like we live in such isolation in our modern
Mm,
world, don't we? It's like people barely even know their neighbors. So, um, yeah, community is so important, and it's definitely something I strive for myself in building community with other mothers and just other women as
yeah.
well. I mean,
And just,
yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I had my second son in 2020 when it was obviously the pandemic, and
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, I enjoyed just being in our little bubble for that time when he was a newborn. But then on the flip side, it was sort of hard to sort of build that support and community as
Mm,
well in that time. So the last few years I've moved since where he was born, but yeah, I've really focused on just building that community, both online but in person, because you can't beat face to face
oh, absolutely.
relationships and community as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so important. It's just you can just come as you are. Like that's what I love about if you've got a group of moms that has similar interests to you, is, sort of like-minded. That's why I love the yoga classes to connect moms. We might not be similar in every area, but you have some sort of generally shared values
Yeah.
and interests. And you like, yeah, just come as you are. There's no judgment. There's no needing to put on a front. I think, yeah, a lot of times we can feel like we're being judged by so many choices in motherhood, right? Like
Mm.
there's lots of opinions around there. So if you just have a group of women that you can trust and be honest with, it's really refreshing, and I think it's essential for, yeah, having a positive experience through motherhood.
Yeah, and like you said, when you go to, I did do a mums and bubs yoga class. It must have been, well, when my youngest, it must have been like the year after 2021, because obviously a lot of things were shut down for so long in 2010, 2020. So,
Mm,
but yeah, it was a similar sort of thing. Like you were there to do something for yourself, and obviously having those shared interests and values. So, having those like-minded women, and I think that's so important because I mean, I know I've honestly have never had a quote unquote bad experience between both my children, but sometimes you can feel like you're being judged when you go to some mothers groups. And I've heard stories from other mothers before.
yeah.
So yeah, really finding, I guess, your people, and
Yeah.
a place that you feel safe to be able to just share, vent all the things.
Yeah,
Um,
not having to put on this front and it's like, oh, we had an awful night last night. I'm feeling terrible today. Like that's okay. That's part of it. Like,
yeah.
if you've got a group of women who are, your people, like they're gonna be like, yep, we've been there or going through it, and you're like, oh, okay, thank God it's not just me.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And are your classes, are they just for mums, or are they like mums and bubs classes, or a mix of all the
A
things?
mix of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, so starting in February, I have a bit of a new schedule happening. So I'm doing mums and bubs, moms and kids, and prenatal. And I really like the beachside mother circles, the ones that are like just for moms. So I'll probably throw
Oh,
some in there as well occasionally. Yeah.
yeah, amazing. Well, I was curious as to like if there's any advice or tips that you would offer mothers who struggle to prioritize themselves without guilt, because I think that can be such a big thing
Mm.
we all go through at some point when we feel torn between our roles as the mother and then also wanting to look after our own needs and desires. So yeah, what would your advice or tip be to mothers who struggle with this?
Well, one, I think, like you said, it's normal. I think I think it'd be hard to find a mom who doesn't struggle with mom guilt in some area or the other, but especially prioritizing themselves. But it's so necessary. I mean, there's so many benefits of doing things that are positive for yourself, right? Whatever that looks like. Of course, like I said, I love yoga and mindfulness, but whatever that is for you, whatever brings you joy, I absolutely think it's so important to prioritize because you've got to fill up your cup. There's so much that lays on the shoulders with mom. So, one, you've got to be able to carry that. There's that saying you can't pour from an empty cup, which I think is true. I think then you're also setting a really good example for your kids of what self-care is. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, they need to see that, even as an adult, like you still have needs, you still need to look after yourself. And I think it's so much more though than just not being able to fill from it, sorry, not being able to pour from an empty cup. Like even though you're a mom, you're still your own human. You're still someone with your own needs, and you've got to make time for that. Maybe it's not as much time as when you had pre-kids. Maybe it looks different, but you are still worth that time. And so I think we can really struggle with that. Like it's
Mm,
so easy for us to try to make ourselves small and, do things that fit into everyone else's schedule.
yeah.
But I think it's so important, like whatever support you have around you, ask for the support, ask for time. So many times as women, we just don't ask, we don't prioritize ourselves, and we get grumpy because we have no time to ourselves. And
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, I mean, I do this, and I'm like, wait, I haven't even told my husband, hey, I need to do this week
Yeah.
at this time, and we'll just like it's so easy to do, but I just haven't made it a priority. So schedule it in, like absolutely,
Yeah.
just schedule it in. Ask for whatever support you have around you. Maybe you get off work a little bit earlier one day and you leave your kids in care a little bit longer. Like whatever that looks like for you,
Mm,
take that. Absolutely take that. And I love like a worthiness meditation or something like that. Like if that feels uncomfortable for you, just sit with that. Like
mm,
figure out what's coming up for you with that and really just reaffirm to yourself that no, you are worthy of still having time for you. You're still your own human being having your own experience. I think that's so important.
yeah, absolutely. I love how you were saying about if you finish work early, you don't have to go quick, straight away to pick up your kids. And this is a perfect opportunity to sit in your car for 15 minutes and
Yeah,
use that time in the
100%.
daycare car park, which I have done before.
Absolutely. Yeah, because I know like we all have to find different ways to yeah, find time for ourselves. And it's like, we'll just look at the support that you actually have around you and articulate, what you actually need. And yeah, don't be scared to take up time, take up space, ask for help.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I do dancing once a fortnight, on a Wednesday night. I actually have my first dance class back tonight, which I'm very excited about. But it's so good to see so many mums there. And I love
Yeah,
that
good.
because I'm like, yes, like they're taking time for themselves. Even like at nighttime, which many of us by nighttime are just like, I'm too tired,
Yeah.
we get into that mindset. But I love it. I love seeing so many mums doing that for themselves and prioritizing themselves at that class that I go to. It's so awesome to see. Um, we need to do more of it.
100%. And then, yeah, if you go as a mom, you see a bunch of other moms there, even if you are struggling with that guilt, it's probably reassuring that, like, oh, all these other moms are taking time for themselves. This is normal. This is
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And it's also like just a little social catch that, I've made such beautiful friends from that. So yeah, like you make those new connections at these types of
Mm.
things that you prioritize for yourself, make new friends, connect with other women. It's so important to do that,
Have
those
an
things.
uninterrupted conversation.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. They're nice to have those ones.
Hmm.
I guess just to wrap up, is there any other tips or advice you would love to give mothers to support them to find a bit more calm in their lives and to help them have a bit more connection in motherhood?
I think, yeah, just finding what works for you, finding whatever movement feels good in your body, and whatever mindfulness strategy works for you. Like we talked about, even just learning how to breathe properly can be
Yeah.
such a powerful tool to regulate your nervous system
Yeah.
when you need it. But there are so many different ways to practice mindfulness, so many different ways to move your body. So finding what feels good for you, and then yeah, seeing what interests you and joining something like that, whether it's with your kid, whether it's not. I mean, there's so much out there because we do need the community. So whether you go to a park run, to
Mm,
there's moms walking groups, there's of
yeah.
course like lots of yoga classes, lots of gyms, finding your people with like common shared interests. And I think when it has like it doesn't have to have a well-being side to it. But I think if you do struggle with that guilt, it can be easier to get into those avenues too. But even if it's like maybe you have a painting hobby and you want to go to a paint class, like whatever that is that brings you joy, go out and find your people with that. Like there will be a community for you, and I'm sure there'll be other moms there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Amazing. And what would be the best way for mums to connect with you online or in the flesh if they're living in the
Yeah.
Gold Coast?
Yes, if you live on the Gold Coast, definitely come to my classes. But you can find me on Instagram at mama underscore yoga underscore time. Nope, sorry. Mama time yoga. So mama underscore time underscore yoga. Sorry. So I post everything that I'm sharing there. And if you really want to dive deep into yoga and mindfulness, I do have a course launching in February that's all about how to do that. It's my mindfulness, it's my mama, sorry, I'm mixing up my words now. It's my mindful mama program. So keep an eye out for that as well.
Amazing. And I'll put um, your IG details in the show notes and any other links to your website so people can easily click on that and find you that way as well. But thank
Perfect.
you, Charlotte. I appreciate your time. So good to have you on. And yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.
Great. Thanks, everyone. I will catch you on next week's episode.